Okay, so I think things might be working. Things might be working. They might not be working. Might have to wait for 11 o'clock. Not sure. Still looking a little bit shaggy around the edges. Could do with a haircut. Be nice when that's open. Hello, hello, and welcome. So, it's nice to see that there are some people here. At any point, if you want to ask some questions, I'll see it come up on the right-hand side of my screen. If you don't understand any of the things that I say, if you're watching this later and you'd like to ask questions as well, this is quite a mentally mind-bending topic. So it's probably good to ask questions as we go through and as I go through. So feel free to yammer me or email me in the working day. I check quite a lot of those things. So that's not a problem. And remember that my email address is awm@colliers.ac.uk. So that's where you can email, or hopefully you understand where the yammer situation is. Okay. So it would be really good to start this conversation about postmodernism with understanding what modernism is. So modernism refers to the time in between the Industrial Revolution and kind of the invention of the internet. That is the modern time. And all of the four theories we've looked at already, so functionalism, Marxism, feminism, and action theory, all explain how that modern world works and how that modern world thinks about things and how it. So I suppose functionalism started, and functionalism gave us a very sort of big macro theory to help us understand how society works and gets together. Marxism came along and criticised that because it saw society being about money. Feminism came along and criticised both of them because they saw society as being male dominated and wanted to change that. And then people like Weber and Becker came along and criticised all three of those theories, saying, hey, look, I can choose how I see the world, and I can choose how I respond and react and interact with the world. So the four theories we've looked at already are modernist theories. Okay, so modernism, industrial revolution to kind of the internet and the invention of the internet. So if we think, I don't know how much history you've done, you've probably done some kind of project on this at primary school. Before the Industrial Revolution, the majority of Britain lived in fields, earned their money from planting stuff in the ground, growing stuff, giving 10% to the cathedral, giving 10% to the lord of the manor, and then they would have what was left. There was kind of a very few rich people, and by far 99% of the world would have been poor before the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution comes along, and then we have this move from the countryside to towns and cities. So we change the entire way we deal with things. We need a more educated workforce. Schools come along. We can't all grow stuff in our back gardens. Yeah, you probably need 3 football pitches to grow enough food for one family for a year. So we don't have that as our back gardens. Most of you, some of you might not even have a back garden. You might just have a balcony. You might not even have a balcony. So it's important to understand that the modern way of life changed everything about how our world works. And so those 4 theories are trying to understand that modern way of living. So now we get to, I suppose, postmodernism. And really, postmodernists are kind of arguing that our society has changed from the modern way of doing things to the post-modern way of thinking about the world and thinking about how things work. And we can kind of summarize that in terms of technological changes, the internet, economic changes, how the internet has helped those kind of things work. Yeah, and then we can also sort of sort that out in terms of political changes. And really, it's the internet that's driven all of those changes. Yeah. In the old days, Winston Churchill didn't have to worry about what he was saying or how he was saying things because nothing was being recorded. And so he could get away with saying things and behaving in ways which you couldn't get away with behaving now because everything's recorded. So that kind of an example of how politics has changed. You know, somebody, do you even need to nowadays believe that? Do you need any evidence of the story that you're going to put out there on the internet? There's lots of fake news. The lovely blonde-haired wanderer over in America keeps talking about fake news, fake news, fake news. Now, is that an issue? Do you need to believe what goes on? Where do you get your information from? At home now, think about it. Where do you get your information from? Where do you get the world view from? Who do you trust? Who do you not trust? Do you check the stories that come into your world? Do you get your stories secondhand through friends, or do you trust the BBC website? Do any of these different sort of organizations like the BBC or Fox News or NBC in America or Sky News, do they have an agenda? Do they have something else? And we'll talk about that later when we get to Marxism. So really what we're saying is that the internet has changed everything, changed absolutely everything. So the internet has changed the whole world. So now we need a new theory, postmodernism, to help us understand that new world. Okay. And so in terms of a postmodernist, what postmodernists are really arguing, keywords to highlight in your notes, they want to understand how that change has taken place. So change is a big word for postmodernism. They want to understand diversity, and they want there to be a completely diverse world, because to a postmodernist there is no truth. You might have your truth, but that's not the same as my truth, and it's not the same as Sarah's truth or Sarah's truth. Yeah, all of our truths are different. So therefore that's kind of quite mind-bending in terms of, well, but surely it's sunny outside. That's a truth. Well, maybe that is a truth, but maybe thinking that sunny is good is my truth. Yeah, and it's not your truth. Yeah, I actually prefer no wind because I do quite a lot of cycling. So wind is bad unless it's behind your back. But then when I go cycling, it never seems to be behind my back. So I don't really like the wind in any way, shape or form. But other people, maybe like the wind farm just off the south coast, they love wind. So therefore wind might be good to them, bad to me. So my truth is going to be different from everybody else's truth. So there is no universalistic truth. To a functionalist, they would disagree with that. To a Marxist, they would disagree with that. To a feminist, they would disagree with that because they're coming from an ideological point of view. But to a postmodernist, there is no truth. Okay, meta-narratives are bad if I'm a postmodernist. What is a meta-narrative? A big story, the Bible, meta-narrative. Functionalism, meta-narrative. Marxism, meta-narrative. Feminism, meta-narrative. The Quran, a meta-narrative. Buddhism, meta-narrative. Anything that says this is how things are, this is the way, the truth and the life, to use a biblical phrase, yeah, is a meta-narrative and cannot be trusted. So therefore we need to get rid of them. Yeah, there are no such thing as a meta, because meta-narratives talk about truth. And remember, there is no truth. Okay, so if I'm a postmodernist, I kind of want to emphasize that idea of diversity and choice and pick and mix and no truth and all of that kind of stuff. And that's what you tend to find with postmodern authors. Now, Sarah and myself have different views on postmodernism, and it's good to bounce these views off against each other. Whereas Sarah thinks that postmodernism, I'm going to quote her, if I'm wrong, she'll tell me, and she can criticize me online in the side if she's watching, or later at a later date, that postmodernism is a really positive theory, and is about sort of choice and diversity and looking at the world as a sort of postmodern, diverse kind of way, and everybody can do whatever they want to do and however they want to do it, as long as they don't hurt anybody else. And that's a very positive view of postmodernism. I take a more negative view of postmodernism. I think that postmodernism is intellectual snobbery. I think that postmodernism is an intellectual way that I can do whatever I want to do and stuff anybody else. I don't care about what anybody else thinks, and I don't care about how anybody else thinks, because I want to do things my way and you guys can all get lost. Yeah, and so therefore, I don't think that postmodernism lends itself to living in a society. If you live in a society, you have to make sacrifices. You have to pay into the society to get stuff back from the society. We are all better and we all get on better because other people do their jobs. Yeah, look at the NHS at the moment. Yeah, we'd be pretty stuffed without the NHS. Yeah, so I can walk along. Well, I'm fine. I'm healthy. That's not a problem. I don't need the NHS. And then all of a sudden I become unhealthy and do need the NHS. And then I'm very glad that the NHS are doing their job. So I think there is truth. And I think there is reality outside of my sort of head. I've already said in the last podcast that Giddens and me probably have a lot in common in terms of how we think about the world. Yeah, that I can choose how I respond to structure, but I can't change the structure within which I live. So that's all of an introduction. Hey, Flip, that's 10 minutes of introduction. I do get a bit carried away when I talk about postmodernism. So let's get into the textbook. I've just spent the first bit talking about the first bit of the textbook. I'm now going to talk about postmodernism proper. So I'm really going to focus on two postmodernists. I'm going to talk about this guy called Foucault, who was mad, French and bald, not alive anymore. He's kind of really interesting as a guy. So he famously said, how can I understand addiction unless I've been addicted to something? So he deliberately became addicted to heroin so he could understand that process of addiction and what that meant. He also, I don't know whether this is euphemistic, this might be an urban myth, but it kind of helps you understand where he comes from a little bit, that he kind of said, well, how can I understand what it's like to be homosexual? Unless I've been homosexual, how can I understand that world? So he went and lived as a homosexual guy in California for a while. And so, I mean, a very interesting kind of challenging kind of guy. And what we're kind of talking about with Foucault and Baudrillard to a sort of similar kind of way. So Foucault is going to say, right, okay, the Enlightenment project, that modernist idea where we can look at society, we can study society, we can look for the bits that are broken in society and try and fix them, yeah, is gone, dead. We can't do that because society is too complicated, yeah. And in the old days, and we'll talk about this more with Baudrillard, in the old days, we have this situation where, in the old days, we have the situation where, sorry, just lost my train of thought there slightly, where money was power. And in the old days, we had this situation where money, and the more money you had meant that you were more powerful and you could do more stuff. Today, maybe it's about knowledge is the power that we have, and information is the power that we have. So he's really interesting, and we'll talk about him a little bit more when we look at the sort of prison kind of idea, the panacoptean. Now, a panacoptean is a prison. If you imagine kind of a semicircle, so a half circle, yeah, where you have a prison guard in the middle, and then all the cells to that prison wing are all set around the edge of the semicircle, so the one guard can look into any one of those prison cells. So you only need one guard to look into all of those prison cells, and all of the prisoners think that they're being watched. So therefore, by being watched, it modifies their behavior. I suppose a little bit like Big Brother. I know it's a bit of an old program now, yeah, or maybe Love Island, I suppose. Yeah, those programs where people are aware that they're being watched, and therefore that modifies their behavior. So somebody like Foucault is kind of arguing that it's knowledge that is kind of important in the world that we live in now, not so much money, and therefore it's truth that's important because we can manage the truth. So, for example, I could put a if I owned a newspaper, I could put one of your faces on that newspaper and said that they were the most evil person in Britain today. And how do you know that they're not? Well, you know that person, hopefully. So if, I choose, it doesn't matter who I choose, but if I just chose one of you, you imagine it's you, most evil person in the world. It goes around the world. Everybody in the world thinks you're really evil, but you know that you're not. But how can you argue against that? Because you don't own a newspaper. I own the newspaper, and I've got you plastered all over everywhere as being this really evil person. Yeah. So therefore, it's not really about truth. It's about people's perception of things. Yeah. So it's really interesting. I've just been watching. Hopefully, you're aware of this. I've just been watching Harry Potter with my youngest son, and Snape is a really interesting character. All the way through the Harry Potter books, evil git, right at the end, perhaps he wasn't such an evil git because you didn't have all of the knowledge. So you get lulled along with thinking that Snape is an evil git. Yeah. And then at the end, you discover that actually he's a bit of a hero, and maybe one of the biggest heroes in the entire book. But that's when you get all the information. But how do we get all of the information? Because we don't challenge ourselves about information, and we don't go and do study about, is that news story true? And we don't think, and I think we should think, who benefits from this story being told? Yeah. So we can ask that a lot around this coronavirus kind of situation at the moment. Yeah. Who benefits from schools reopening? Well, you guys benefit because you get teaching. Who else benefits? Is there a sort of level to which the government are going to go, well, I don't mind a few 100,000 people dying as long as these other things happen that are good? And is that something that we should be thinking about and criticising and getting involved with a more critical way of dealing with things? I wonder whether that would be a good idea, to be more critical in a positive way. Who benefits from this decision being made? For those of you who are more politically aware, have a little look at the HS2 stories that's been rumbling away the last 2 or 3 days. Who benefits from the lies that's been being told about that HS2 kind of thing? So somebody like Foucault is talking about knowledge, talking about truth, and how that you can't have truth. Somebody like Baudrillard is talking about this very strange world called simulacra, which kind of just means signs. A little bit hard to explain, but I'm going to have a go anyway. So I don't know if you follow sport at all, but I follow sport. It's been a bit hard with all of this lockdown stuff. I've been enjoying the German football over the past couple of days, even though it's been a bit quiet. I've still been enjoying it. That's been quite nice. Who would have known they played football in Germany? Flip, I just thought it was here. Yeah. But having said that, Nike is a really good example of this idea of simulacra. Now, question: does Nike own any factories that make trainers or sports clothing? Answer: no. They own no factories whatsoever. Nike is an office in Seattle where they come up with the ideas and they design the trainers. Sorry, that's my dog. That's my dog. Sorry, Dixie. Nike. I'm just going to have to deal with this. I'm sorry. I'm doing a live stream. Such a naughty doggy. Such a naughty doggy. Oh, what? Okay, that was just a bit exciting, front door and everything like that. Okay, so next thing, where was I? I was talking about Nike owning a office block in Seattle. Yeah, very good. Well done for Nike owning that office block in Seattle. They don't own any factories, so they design the shoes. They send the shoes around the world. As in send the designs around the world to factories. Those factories are made, the tick is stuck on the side of it, and then they're shipped to all of the shops. Even Nike stores aren't owned by Nike. They're franchises for other things. And when you think about the, again, sorry, lost my train of thought. Again, I'll get this sorted. When you think about how much when they advertise, and you think about what's going on when they advertise, they don't ever say, here's a trainer, yeah, this is the new trainer, go out and buy it now. They've got these really sort of cool rappers and DJs and football stars and basketball stars and tennis stars that advertise it. So you kind of think, well, if I'm going to wear basketball boots like Michael Jordan, I'm going to be able to play like Michael Jordan. I might have the life of Michael Jordan. So really, somebody like Nike isn't selling a product, they're selling an idea. They're selling an idea, which is very interesting that they're selling an idea. What Baudrillard is talking about again is this idea that knowledge is more important. Knowledge gives you power. Yeah, that it's how you interpret the world around you that helps you understand, and that sort of change. And again, no truth, no meta narratives, and all of those kind of things put together. Okay. So hopefully that kind of gives you a little bit of idea about somebody like Foucault and somebody like Baudrillard. Okay, so this brings us to some criticisms. So you could have a criticism here if we take a look at Beck and Giddens. So if we look at Beck first of all, Mr. Beck came up with this idea of risk. Okay. And that we now live in a far riskier society. We don't live in a postmodern society, although things are progressing kind of in a riskier way. Let me explain risk. So imagine that you live in a village with your 15 or 20 friends that you have. And so all of you know each other really, really well. So if you have only lived in that village and you've never moved out of that village, and we're talking 200-300 years ago, you've never moved out of that village, then you've got the situation where if you went out with somebody else, then you know everything about them. So there's not a lot of risk involved in that situation because you know how stupid they are, you know how cool they are, you know how lovely they are, you know the mistakes that they've made, you know who they've been with before. So therefore you're entering into that situation with lots and lots of knowledge. Okay, so we fast forward to today and you've got your phone in front of you and you've got whatever app you might want to have there, and you're scanning through to find the love of your life on your phone, and you choose somebody to go and meet them. You know nothing about that person whatsoever, and therefore it's a far riskier proposition. 300 years ago, you walk across the street, you're not going to get run over. There's nothing to run you over. Yeah. Today, you walk across the street in the normal world without this lockdown, and there are lots of things that are going to knock you over: bikes and motorbikes and cars and buses, and maybe even an aeroplane falling from the sky. So therefore, what we're saying here is that society is more risky. It's not postmodern. It's not changed in any way. We just live in an ultimately riskier society. Giddens, we've talked about Giddens before. We've talked about this kind of idea of there is a structured society. I can't change my language, so I understand the world from that language-driven point of view, and then I react to things because of the language that I've been taught, and I understand things because of the language I've been taught. I think in the last video I gave you the example of your exams. So next summer, your exams are going to happen. Is there anything you can do to change the fact that those exams are going to happen? The answer is no, they're going to happen. You can affect how you react to those exams. Yeah, so you can bin it, run away, you can work really hard. So you can choose how you react to the structure of society, but you can't choose not to engage with the structure of society. I suppose on one level you could if you bought an island and went away and lived on that island and had no interaction with anybody else, but there's a rare person that can cope with that kind of situation. So both Beck and Giddens are arguing against postmodernists in the real world today. So Beck's alive today, Giddens is alive today, and they both argue that postmodernism isn't happening. Okay, but then we get to the last bit of the textbook, which is a Marxist view of postmodernism. Now, we get quite a few Marxist postmodernists running around the place. Yeah, so we've got postmodernists. Oh, I've just lost my bit in the textbook. Yeah, like Jameson and Harvey are two Marxist postmodernists. And pretty much they're arguing that, hey, postmodernism is a logical conclusion, maybe not conclusion, but extension of capitalism. Okay, so what we've got here is that in the world that we live in today, that we have this situation where the internet makes it easier to rob money off people, whether it's by legal means or whether it's by illegal means. But the internet makes taking money from you infinitely easier and infinitely better for the capitalists. It makes the accumulation of wealth more flexible, and it makes politics more murky. So maybe some of the ideas that we've got at the moment of what's happening with Boris Johnson, and it doesn't matter whether he's a good person, whether he lies or whether he doesn't lie, because he puts an interesting image across and people seem to like that image and vote for that image. And again, in America with Donald Trump, it's the same kind of situation that people seem to, it doesn't matter whether he tells lies, it doesn't matter whether he's honest or doing the right thing, but people are helping, and people are making that situation happen, I suppose. And so we enter into this position, I suppose, of post-truth, is what fake news, post-truth. We've talked about that before, and this textbook talks about that a little bit. So really, from a Marxist postmodern point of view, or a postmodern Marxist point of view, then this idea of there being no truth, there being no meta-narrative, there being no right, no wrong, lots of choice, lots of diversity, it just makes everything that bit murkier, that bit harder to understand, and then maybe makes your exploitation that much easier to get. Okay, so let me have a little think now about how I would structure an essay on this topic. Well, obviously, I want to have a little bit of a chat about Foucault and look at what he said in the textbook and find out a bit more if you can. I want to have a little bit of a chat about Baudrillard. Yeah. In my introduction to an essay on postmodernism, I want to have that chat about change and how things have changed. That would help and help your essay make sense. And then I suppose in the next two paragraphs, paragraph 3, we could have that sort of late modernism and how that's different. And paragraph 4, we could have that Marxist postmodern kind of idea. And then again, just like the action theory essay, we can go back and have a little idea about what's going on in terms of how does functionalism differ from Baudrillard? How does Marxism differ from Foucault? How does action theory differ from Marxist postmodernism? And you can have those kind of conversations. Yeah, and then you've got 4 lovely paragraphs where you hopefully will have a lot more understanding of this topic. Well, I hope this has been helpful. I've had no questions come up on the side, so hopefully you'll email me some questions if you need to or want to. That would be a really good thing to do. And I think, again, I'm going to do another lesson, not next Monday, but the Monday after, if that would be helpful. If it's not helpful, I'm not going to do it because they are a little bit nervous to do and take a bit of preparation. But if they are useful and I get a bit of feedback about that, then I'm definitely happy to do them. Okay, thank you very much, Erin. I look forward to seeing you. Hope you're all safe. Hope you've all chosen your one person that you can go and see. Don't cuddle them though, that's bad. You're not allowed to cuddle yet. Yeah, but you might be able to sit in a park and chat to them, observing that 2 meters worth of distance. So see you later. Bye-bye. And I'll look forward to speaking to you again later. Bye.